Thank you, John. I'm Mike Sullivan. I hereby call the Lone Star College System Single Member District 7 Public Forum on redistricting to order at 6 p.m. And I'd like to turn the floor over to Board Chair Miriam Saldivar for comments.
Good evening, everyone. No comment here, Chairman Sullivan.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we proceed, I'd like to thank some people and departments for making this tonight's meeting possible. Mario Castillo and his team, Dr. Rebecca Riley, who is president of Lone Star College Montgomery campus and over the Conroe Center where this meeting is being held. Dr. Head, who has assisted in preparation for these meetings, as well as his chief of staff and board liaison, Desiree Probasco. Okay, thank you. Lone Star Police Department for being present and ensuring our security and the facilities are safe for everyone. And with that said, I'd like to introduce Lisa McBride, who is outside counsel with Thompson and Horton.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first community forum for Single Member District 7. I am excited to be here tonight to talk about redistricting. Tonight, I'm joined by my colleague, Annie Stein, sitting to my right, and joining us virtually through Zoom are our wonderful demographic team, Rocky Gardner and Matthew Cluck, who you'll be able to see on screen when they present some information later tonight. For those of you who are joining us from the public, if you've been watching recent board meetings, you will know that we've done a legal education with the board. We've presented to the board its census data, as well as initial maps. Tonight's meeting is a combination of those three presentations to make sure that you have a more intimate opportunity to ask questions and to be familiar with that information and how that information specifically impacts single member district number 7. And with that introduction, I'm going to call on my colleague, Annie Stein, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for being here, everyone. So I'm going to lay out sort of a roadmap for what we want to go over this evening when it comes to redistricting. First, we're always going to start with our legal overview of redistricting, and that's going to answer the why of redistricting, why we're legally obligated to go through this process that we are currently undergoing. And then the next 3 bullets there are going to answer more of the how question. We're going to first look at our population change analysis, which is the population growth within the college district overall, and how population has shifted within our 9 single member districts. And that's going to determine how we redraw and rebalance our 9 districts. And we'll go into that in a lot of detail. Next, we're going to look at a consent decree that the college is currently bound by that was entered into in 2013. And this is also going to tell us how we have to draw certain districts with certain demographic makeup. And then finally, we're going to look, when it comes to the how question, we're going to look at redistricting criteria that was adopted by the board back in December. And there are 9 elements of 9 criteria that we're going to use to, not when I say we, of course, I mean the Board of Trustees will use to judge our proposed plans. And then after that, Mr. Gardner is going to present our proposed maps. And you can look specifically at single member district 7 and see where the changes are in terms of boundaries and population shifts. And then finally, we'll close with our overall redistricting timeline, which was also adopted by the board in December. And we'll go over the immediate next steps so you can follow along. So the first question we just want to answer for everyone is, what exactly is redistricting? And it is the process by which the boundaries of our elected districts, so in this case, it's our 9 single member districts. It's the process by which the boundaries are redrawn after we have new population data from coming out of the 2020 census. So as I said, as a population grows or changes within each single member district, we move the boundaries so that we are actually shifting population into other districts in order to achieve near equal population in each district. And as you have probably gathered by now, your college is currently divided into 9 single member districts, and you can see them all here on the slide. And I know I discussed the purpose of this effort is to create near equal size districts, but we're talking about population size. So when you look at single member district 7, it looks much larger than single member district 3, for example. But when this map was created in 2013, the demographers established that the population size in these 9 districts were of near equal size. And then here are all your 9 elected officials who represent each single member district. And you'll notice that single member district 7 is currently a vacant seat. So that is why trustee Mike Sullivan is here tonight, the chair of our redistricting committee. And here is the three board members who were assigned the duty of serving on our redistricting committee to go through the more of the nitty gritty process of determining our new plans. And trustee Mike Sullivan is the chair, and trustee Pierce from single member district 2 and trustee Murillo from single member district 4 serve on that committee. The next thing we want to talk about is why we do this process every 10 years. And it is required under law, and specifically in our Texas Education Code, school districts and college districts such as Lone Star College are required to redivide their single member districts if, after receiving the new census data, so the data we received in 2020, for example, shows that the population of our largest single member district is greater than the population of the smallest single member district by more than 10%. So this is going to be referred to throughout this presentation as the 10% rule. And the law also gives us a precise timeline. So we have to complete a redistricting process within no later than the 90 days prior to the next regular trustee election after we have the new census data. So in our case, our next trustee election is November 8th, 2022, which gives us about 3 months prior a deadline of August 10th, 2022. And as I indicated, the board in December adopted a very elaborate timeline so that we can make sure we comply with this deadline, and we'll have a little time to spare even. So that's why we're here in February, trying to make sure we have ample time to gather community input and follow through with our timeline. So the next question is how are we going to do this? And as I indicated when we started out, there's really 3 things that we need to be aware of. First, under our state law, under our 10% rule, we have to redraw the districts in a way that we can redistribute population in each district so they are near equal and therefore come into compliance with the 10% rule. So this means shifting boundaries, so redrawing lines of our districts, but we're actually shifting population from one single member district to another. So we're back in compliance with that 10% rule, and we have 9 districts that have near equal population after population has grown and shifted from district to district. And then also, as we'll talk about, the other 2 factors in determining how to draw these new districts are the consent decree and this resolution agreement that we're bound by. And then, of course, our board adopted redistricting criteria. So we'll go into those in more detail. The next topic we want to go over is the U.S. Census. And as most of you probably know, the Census Bureau collects data on United States population every 10 years because it is mandated by the Constitution. And so this number is going to be how we decide how many congressional representatives each state is apportioned, and also how we draw our elected, our districts, and in this case, our single member districts. So really the census data collected in 2020 is what's driving this entire process. That data is what tells us how much the population has grown and where it's grown, and therefore how we have to go back to the drawing board and rebalance our districts. And Mr. Gardner will show you with the actual numbers that our 9 districts are currently outside of or not complying with our 10% rule after we've gathered that data from the 2020 census. And so we will, in fact, have to redraw and redistrict. So there's 3 sets of data that we consider from the US Census. And the most basic data set is called the total population. And this is the number of people residing in any jurisdiction on Census Day, which was April 1st, 2020. So this is going to include people under the age of 18 who are not eligible to vote, people who are not citizens, and therefore not eligible to vote. It basically is the census is required to count residents. So if you're in the jurisdiction on the day the Census Bureau shows up to collect data, you're counted in that total population. And total population is important because that's the number we use when we are balancing the population in each district. When we are trying to comply with that 10% rule, our state law that says the biggest district cannot be 10% bigger than the smallest district in terms of population, we're looking at that total population number. The second data set we look at is voting age population, and this is the number of persons residing in the district who were 18 years of age or older in the jurisdiction. And then the third data set we look at, which is more complicated, and we'll go into more detail about why we need this number, is citizen voting age population, and we call it CVAP for short. This is the number of persons who are 18 years of age or older and who are also citizens residing in that given jurisdiction. And the US Census doesn't actually have a citizen question, and that's why this number is sometimes trickier, because it's an estimate based on other surveys that the US Census Bureau conducts. So I just always think that's important to keep in mind. And one more thing about the CVAP is this is the number that we are going to use when we're trying to comply with the Voting Rights Act. And for example, in our consent decree, our resolution that we are bound by currently requires the college to create multiple districts that have a certain demographic makeup. And that's based on the CVAP number. It's not based on total population, but based on CVAP. So that's why that number is going to be important when we look at our data, and we'll go into more detail about that. And again, I just want to emphasize that when we're trying to achieve this goal of drawing districts that have near equal population, we are just looking at total population, and we're trying to create districts that are near equal in population, but certainly comply with that 10% rule. So they don't have to be, and probably can never be, exactly equal, but we don't want to have one district with a significantly larger number of people residing in that district than another one. So that is important to keep in mind. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gardner, and he is going to go over the data that has been gathered from the 2020 census and compare it to our population data from the 2010 census, and show you how much the college has grown and how the population has shifted.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Can you guys see me? I turned on my camera, but I can't tell if I can. I didn't get a picture of myself, so hopefully my hair is straight as it gets. So it's a pleasure to be here, and we're starting with, and I guess Annie, you'll advance for me as I move forward, or someone will.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So with 2010, we're going to back up and start with 2010 because that's where this all began. And really, these new maps that we showed on the previous slide were actually from probably done in 2011 because the census comes out in April. You can see that the smallest district at the time was District 4 with 190,000, and the largest district was District 9 with 204,000. That was about a 7.3% differential, and that's right within the 10% number that we've talked about. We've got 198,000 as an average, so everyone stayed pretty tight, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do for 2020. You begin to see that some of the different populations of each district, some influence districts where your combined populations of Hispanic and African American are over 50%. In District 3, in District 6. And then if you look in District 4, you can see the Hispanic population is over 50% in itself. So an opportunity district there. And you can see the CVAP, which is a number that's very, very important, continues to be over 50% for District 4 as well. And next slide, please. So then we jump to 2020. What's happened in 2020? Of course, there's growth. We're now sitting at 2.26 million persons. The average is now 251 for each district. District 4 is still the smallest district, but as you can see now, District 1 is the largest district with 279,000 persons. Now they're not largest by much, because you can see that we've got 270 in 3 other districts. So they're all up there pretty high, but we have 2 districts, District 3 and District 4, that are below 210,000. So we're outside that 10% by quite a bit at 38.2%. Now, what was interesting though, our opportunity district, District 4, remained an opportunity district, actually became a little bit stronger. We still had districts of influence in 2, 3, and 6, where their combined totals were over 50%. So that continued to be the same. So this of course leads us to having to develop new plans. We're over 38.2%. So we begin to work on some new plans. And but of course we'll look at the change first. Sorry, I forgot that slide was there. So growth from 2010 to 2020 of almost 500,000 persons, 476,000. You can see that we had 4 districts with over 70,000 persons growth. And then districts 3 and District 4 were the least amount of growth, with 11,000 and 14,000 respectively. Some changes there. We had a drop in the share of Anglo population. So their percent dropped by almost 10%. We had a pretty big increase in the Hispanic population by almost 5%. And then the other populations increased within 1 to 2%. So in District 7, if we look at what happened in District 7 from 2010 to 2020, District 7 went from 198,000 to 269,000. So over 70,000 growth, strong growth. I think anyone around the Conroe area witnessed that, of course. You're very the Anglo population remained pretty strong there at 65%, became 54%, but still the majority of the population is Anglo, and that didn't really change between 2010 and 2020, although it got a little bit lower in percentages, but the CVAP remained very high, was 80% before, and now is still over 70%. So some takeaways. So Lone Star College added 476,000 persons from 2010 to 2020. The district population is now 2.2 million persons, almost 2.3. Total population differential 38.2%. So that far exceeds the 10% that we need to. It tells us we definitely need to make some changes. Most populous S&D changed from 9 to 1, and the least populous remained District 4. So redistricting is now required.
You'll go to the next slide. Now we're going to talk about 2 different aspects that constrain how we adjust our map to deal with the population change. So we know that we're over the 10%. So we have to balance our lines, and that will affect every single member district, but there are some constraints on how we balance our lines or how we adjust our map. And the first constraint comes from the 2013 consent decree that the college system entered into, going from an at-large electoral system to a single member system. This was a voluntary consent decree entered into by the college, and there are 2 conditions in that consent decree that relate to redistricting. The first one is that the college system single member district map must include at least 1 single member district where Latino citizens make up a majority of the citizen voting age population, that CVAP number. And that in 2013 was single member district number 4 and continues to be single member district number 4. The other constraint that we have is that we have to have what are known as 2 influence districts. And in this particular case, it is the population of African Americans and Latinos will have significant voting influence in at least 2 other districts. So districts other than single member District 4. And what that typically means is that the combined percentage of African Americans and Latinos in a given single member district is greater than 50% citizen voting age population. And if you'll remember the previous charts we showed, both in 2013 as well as now, single member districts 2, 3, and 6 satisfy that criteria. So we not only have 2 influence districts, we have 3 influence districts, as well as an opportunity district, which is District 4. And so we have to maintain that under any new map that rebalances us to get us to meet near equal population and under the 10% rule. You'll go to the next slide. Additional constraints on how we rebalance our map include the 9 board adopted criteria for redrawing maps. The first one being is that we're going to use easily identifiable both geographic and political boundaries to be the boundaries between our single member districts, meaning that we're going to use highways or freeways or election precincts or creeks or streams to be those natural breaks between single member districts. That's a traditionally upheld redistricting principle that's been upheld by courts. The second redistricting criteria, it will be familiar to you because it comes from both state and federal law, which is all of our single member districts have to be as near as possible equal population. Not the same size in terms of population, but near equal, getting closer to that average size number that we were looking at when we were looking at the 2020 data. And then because state law requires it, our third criteria is that any new map that rebalances us because we were out of compliance with the 10% rule has to bring us back into compliance with the 10% rule. So that deviation has got to be under 10%. State law also requires that our single member districts be compact, and that relates to both physical compactness and political compactness. Physical compactness means what do our single member districts look like? Do they have long arms extending well north and south of the district or east and west of the district? Or are they more rounded and curved or rectangular? The more rectangular, rounded or curved is the more compact that it is. But we do have these 9 criteria that we're considering, as well as the criteria from our consent decree. And so sometimes taking those criteria into account and taking the criteria of our consent decree into account does mean that our shapes are less than perfect squares and rectangles. There might be some arms, so long as we don't do it to the exclusion of the other criteria that are on this list or the criteria that are in our consent decree. So that's what physical compactness means. Political compactness means that we're going to keep communities together and neighborhoods together to keep our single member districts compact in that sense as well. State law also requires that our single member districts be composed of contiguous territory. So we're not going to have any holes in our district, but if we were to take a pencil and outline the boundaries of our single member districts, we'd be able to do so without lifting up our pencil. That's essentially what contiguous means. The next criteria that the board adopted, and it's a permissible criteria, is that through this process, we're going to preserve incumbent constituency relations by making sure to place the residents of our current trustees within their single member district boundaries and not draw any of our trustees out of their single member districts. A requirement to represent a single member district as a trustee is that you live within it. So one of the criteria is to take into account the current residences of our current trustees and not draw them out of their single member districts. If you'll go to the next slide, we'll talk about the last 4 criteria. The 6th criteria is where possible, we're going to keep communities together of interest as well as neighborhoods and not split them across single member districts. Of course, we may have to in order to comply with the requirements of our consent decree and or the 10% rule. But where possible, we're not in conflict with the consent decree or the 10% rule. We're going to do our best with the assistance of the trustees as well as assistance of the community to identify what are our neighborhoods, what are our communities of interest, and to keep them together in one single member district. Criteria number 7 allows us to be a good election partner with other entities that have elections on the same day as we do. And we're going to try to avoid splitting county precincts across single member district lines. Again, this criteria is subordinate to the 10% rule. It's subordinate to complying with the Voting Rights Act. It's subordinate to complying with our consent decree. But short of violating one of those things, we're going to attempt, with the assistance of the board and assistance of the community, to not split county election precincts across single member district lines. Number 8, or the 8th criteria, is language from the Voting Rights Act. The Constitution and the analysis under the Constitution views decision based on race with suspicion, and only allows us to specifically take race into account when we are making decisions as a governmental entity to address a compelling governmental interest, and only to the narrow extent to address that compelling governmental interest. Satisfying a federal consent decree that's based on the Federal Voting Rights Act is a compelling governmental interest, and we're only doing it to the narrow extent that we need to comply with that consent decree, meaning maintaining one opportunity district and maintaining at least 2, in our case, we know we can do 3 influence districts. So that means that if the new maps continue to maintain those 4 single member districts, an opportunity district, and 2, in our case, 3 influence districts, we would have satisfied criteria number 8. Criteria number 9 is a sort of, in redistricting parlance, equivalent to, if it's not broken, don't attempt to fix it. So we're going to use our existing single member district boundaries to the extent possible. We're going to try to preserve those boundaries. Those were the boundaries that were adopted in 2013, that were agreed upon as a resolution to a lawsuit, agreed upon by a federal court, a federal judge. And so only to the extent necessary to comply with the other 8 criteria adopted by the board, as well as our consent decree, will we deviate from those boundaries. We know we have to deviate some because we got to get back within the 10%. And then in order to address the other criteria, we might have to deviate from those original boundaries a little bit more. But as you will see, all of the proposed maps will start with your 2013 map as a baseline and be making adjustments to that 2013 map in order to comply with the criteria identified here, as well as the elements of your consent decree. We'll go to the next slide. So before I call on Rocky to talk about the 2 proposed maps that get us back into balance, I know we've presented a lot of information. We've talked about the 10% rule and your data. We've talked about the consent decree. We've talked about your 9 criteria. As you're looking at these proposed maps, the first question should be, are we back in balance? Are we under that 10% deviation? If we have a check mark there, we get to keep moving forward and ask the next question. Then the next question is, under a proposed map, have we satisfied the consent decree? Is single member District 4 still majority Hispanic based on citizen voting age? And do we have at least 2 influence districts where the combination of African American and Latino population is greater than 50%? In our case, we'd like 3 because we had it in 2013 and we don't want to have any retrogression. We don't want to slide from what our position was in 2013. So that would be the second question. First question, are we under 10%, back into balance, near equal population? Second question, do we have that opportunity district maintained in single member district number 4, as well as our 3 influence districts? And then the last question is, how well do each of the maps comply with the other redistricting criteria? And there could be one map that does a better job of complying with those redistricting criteria, and that would be the basis of advocating for or supporting that map over another map. So we use the language of our criteria and our consent decree to discuss maps and to talk about why we favor one map versus the other. And at this point, we're going to take what we've learned about our census data, about our consent decree, and about our redistricting principles and apply them to proposed maps that actually bring us back into balance given our new 2020 numbers. Rocky, if you could take it away from here.
Right. Thanks, Lisa. So the map you're looking at right now is Plan 1. And just to kind of describe a few things on the map, the dark blue outline that you see are the current or the existing single member districts for Lone Star College. The individual colors that you see is where we've made changes or highlighted the changes. So if you see color bleeding through a blue line, then that means that that district is gaining population from the district that it encroached. And the opposite would be if you have, the other direction, obviously. And if you recall from everything that we've looked at, districts 3 and 4 were our smallest districts. District 7 was one of our largest districts. So in every case, District 7 being about 170,000 persons, and our average being about 270, and our average being 250, we know we have to pull some population out of 7 to start bringing population down. So we go to the next slide, we can see where all the changes are. Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if we want the black circles. Okay, so you can see here that with this plan, the first thing that we see is we're at 9% differential. Number one, taken care of. The average being 251, you can see that 7 is now sitting at 246. District 4, although still the smallest, is now within 9% of the largest, which is District 9. So they're within about 20,000 persons of each other. So we've met that criteria. If we go down and we look at District 4, our opportunity district, you can see that District 4 still remains an opportunity district with well over 50% of population. And then you can see if we look at Districts 2, District 3, and District 6, that they remain districts of influence districts. And so you can see that with Plan 1, we've accomplished everything that Lisa asked us to do so far. We'll start with that. And the changes, okay, this is the change map. So you can see there were lots of changes had to be made because we had to move population to 6 so we could move population out of 5. You can just see it's like playing dominoes. The dominoes go all the way down until we can populate Districts 3 and District 4 is the bottom line. They were the ones that need the most help. I think now we zoom into the 7's change. In Plan 1, District 7's change, you can see here it's in purple. We've zoomed in there, and then we have one more slide where you can see it a little closer. Mm-hmm. There we go. So this is these are the streets over here. I think it's a Sendera Ranch Drive, and this is, I think, called Honea Egypt Road. So we came up there into District 7. We came across Lake Creek, the West Fork, San Jacinto River, and then down 45. So that's the area there that we brought out of 7, moved that into 5. Pretty straightforward there. So single member District 7 loses population to single member District 5. Plan 2. So we're going to jump to Plan 2 now. So we look at Plan 2, it's a little different, but the same thing. We're still trying to move populations. In this case, we moved the population from 7 down into 8. And when we did this, we moved enough population out of 7 that 5 actually, that 7 then was able to pick up a little bit of population in this north part of 5. And we have the black circles coming up soon. Again, we're at 9.2% differential, the average being 251,000. Now we see that Plan 4, again, still the smallest, but up to 240,000. Plan 2, in this one, District 2, is the largest at 262,000. So we just shift that a little bit. District 4 remains smallest, again, 9.2%, but you see that we're still within our opportunity district. District 4 is still above 50% CVAP. Districts 2, 3, and 6 remain above 50% CVAP. So we're still in good shape with that second criteria as well. And here's the changes. So you can see a lot of changes. Some are very similar, some are different. In 7, there's a few more changes than what were made in Plan 1. We can look at some of those changes as well. You can see there, we've zoomed in a little bit. Again, a little bit of 7. Well, a lot of 7 is going into 8, and then a little bit of District 5 is going up into 7, just kind of a dense area there. So we zoom in there. This is Highway 242 to the north. Come down the creek and come all the way over to FM 1314. So everything inside there, Chateau Woods, moves from District 7 to District 8. Next one, yeah, so this just, we use FM 1485 as a northern border there. It's a clean change. That's one thing we try to do as much as possible. We tried to kind of make some clean edges while we did this, so things didn't look too choppy wherever we could. So everything south of 1485. And then finally, we used Greenbridge Drive and Research Forest as a southern border and moved some population back up into District 7. Again, it's a pretty smooth and clean line there. So in this case, Plan 7 loses population to single member District 8, but single member District 7 gains population from single member District 5 in the Southwest. A little bit different. If we compare the plans, where it gets fun. So District 7 now, this makes it kind of an easy way to look at it. You can focus on the change. 198,000 in 2010, we jumped up to almost 270,000. And then we brought it back down to 246 in Plan 1 and 260 in Plan 2. Keeping in mind the average is 251. So we sat just between those sweet spots there. You can see that by 2020, the Anglo voting age population had dropped from 70% to 59%. In both these plans, we stay right around that average. All of our averages really stay pretty tight in both of these plans. And if you look at the CVAP, again, we were 73.8 in 2020, and you can see that we're still over 73 in Plan 1 and up as high as 75.2 in Plan 2. So they stayed very consistent. Thank you.
Thanks, Rocky. Trustee Sullivan, at this time, would it be appropriate to take some questions from any members of the audience before moving on to timeline and next steps?
Yes, ma'am, it would be Ms. McBride. Thank you. Would you like to do that, or would you like for me to ask for questions? So there,
Absolutely. Those who are participating remotely, feel free to chime into the chat or use one of the reaction cues to indicate that you're raising your hand. And of course, anyone in the audience that might have a question, you can stand up at the podium.
Ms. McBride, is Rocky, can you hear me?
Rocky, can you hear Trustee Sullivan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
May I, we didn't have anyone from the public ask.
I'm not
raise.
seeing
We don't see
anyone
a
chime
chat.
into the
John,
chat.
can you verify? Doesn't appear to be anyone that wants to ask any questions. I do have some questions. Chair Salivar, would you like to have the microphone?
I don't have
Any questions? Okay. Okay, yes, ma'am. We'll come back to you before we close, though, just to make sure. And let the record reflect that Dr. Steve Head, Chancellor, Lone Star College System, has joined us and is in the audience. Dr. Head, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. So Rocky, there's been, this may sound a little political, but I'm going to not discuss politics when I ask these questions. But right now, District 7 position is vacant. There's no trustee currently serving because the trustee that had the position moved and resigned. So there's been a lot of conjecture, if you will, that we would be unable to properly represent the constituents of District 7. So the chair and I are here, and we're going to be at the second meeting as well. The chancellor is here, legal counsel is here. And I'd like for you to offer commentary, but factual commentary, as to what changes in ethnicity of the population have been made. And if, in your professional opinion, you think that that poses any material disadvantage to anyone in District 7 going forward.
Yes.
Thank you, Trustee Yeah, thanks, Lisa. You know, really, we did not make any, there are no significant changes between either one of these plans. There was a drop between 2010 and 2020. You know, the Anglo population, the share dropped from 65% to 54%. But as you can see, moving forward, we're still right very tight in that 55 to 54% range. Actually, across all categories, the moves that we made kept it very considerate. I mean, very consistent. I don't know that, Lisa, she would know legally, but I don't see anything there that would cause any problems at all. Lisa.
Okay, we have charts, you have charts. Would you do me a favor and just kind of walk through each of the lines and is ethnicity the proper term to use for race and ethnicity, please, just for the record, so we'll have it verbally, the record.
Yeah, based on
we were
based
and where
on
we're going.
Sure. You can see that if we look at the, I'm going to start with the percentages because I think percentage is the best way to look at this. So based on total population percentages in 2010, Anglo population represented 65% of the population of District 7. By 2020, that number had dropped to 54.6. If you can see from this chart here, in Plan 1, that number drops about 1% to 53.5%. And in Plan 2, that number goes up a little bit to 55.6%. Very tight. Asian population increased from 2010 to 2020, very like it has throughout the state. And then you can see that at 2.1%, we were again 1.8% and 2.3% between the two plans. The African-American population being right at 6% in 2020 is still right at 6% in Plan 1 and just under, but if we took off the decimal places, it'd be sitting at 6% as well. Hispanic population, 33%. Hispanic population a little bit larger in Plan 1 at 34.5%. And in Plan 2 sits right around 32%. And other population increased from 1.7 to 4.4%. That was a big jump for other population, but you can see that our plans going forward stayed at 4.3 and 4.4. That's based on total population. Voting age population, we saw very similar trends. The drop was about 10% at the Anglo population, down to about 60%. But you can see there that both in Plan 1 and Plan 2, they stayed right at 60% voting age population, and CVAP stayed over 70%, pushing 74% at both Plan 1 and Plan 2. I'm going to combine both those because they really are tied together, that voting age population. The Asian voting age population, again, 2.2%, pretty consistent with what we saw over the total population, 2.0% and 2.3% in Plan 2. The African-American population stayed at 5.8% in both voting age population for Plan 1 and Plan 2, and their citizen voting age population was 4.7% in 2020, and we stayed right around 4.6 and 4.5%. Finally, Hispanic jumped up to 18.4% CVAP, 28, almost 30% for voting age population, and you can see there that our Plan 1 brought them up even a little bit higher to 30.2%, and in Plan 2 it's 28%. And then the citizen voting age pop was very consistent as well, 19.3% and 17%. Does that help?
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Do you see in your eyes professionally and other demographic plans you've done for other clients, do you see anything that jumps out as discriminatory, unbalanced, unfair, not right? Any comments?
Based on the criteria I'm given, I don't, Lisa would, the council would be better to judge if there would be any discriminatory thing, I think. But from our perspective, I think that these look great. Not just because we did it either. I think it's pretty smooth.
Okay, thank you, Rocky. Chair Saldivar has questions.
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan. Just in terms of keeping with the constituency and the communities together, at times ISD surround themselves with communities. Is there a way where, or can you show us, Rocky, if there was any disturbance in like moving ISDs with this new redistricting?
We did not look at the ISD boundaries in this case. I've got the file up in my office, so I'm gonna look real
Or
quick.
that you know of, did we have a lot of huge changes in terms of ISDs?
I don't believe there was.
Okay.
But I can tell you real quick because I have it right in front of me right now. So
Okay.
let me bring this up. Yeah, so the area that we moved, the area in Plan 1 that was moved was in Conroe IS. It doesn't change school districts at all. Now in Plan 2, I got it. Let me see. Let me check real quick. I have it here. In Plan 2, it's, in Plan 2, actually, I don't believe we did see a change in a district there. The area, there was a section, but it's the same district there as well. Most of it is all in Conroe ISD. We have a little bit of that Humble ISD, I think. That I've seen so many districts, I get them. I'm sorry, New Caney ISD. There's a little bit of New Caney ISD, but those same area, the area that we moved it's still in New Caney ISD, I guess. It's being represented by, that area was partially represented by District 8 anyway, because Conroe and New Caney both already went into District 8 to the areas that we moved it, if that makes sense. So it's still split. I guess that's the answer. That's an easier way to answer. New Caney and Conroe ISDs were split between Districts 8 and Districts 5 prior, and they still are.
Okay, so there was no major changes in
Yes.
in the
No, ma'am.
foreseeable future. You don't see any issues with that?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Saldivar. So Lisa McBride, I'm going to kind of pose generally the same questions to you, if you don't mind. As we know,
Mhm.
District 7 is currently vacant, does not have a trustee present to participate. So we've made every effort as a board to make sure that voices are heard from District 2 constituents. In looking at Rocky's numbers and presentation, do you see anything that jumps out at you as discriminatory, unfair, a major change, major shift, anything at all that should rise to our attention?
So for purposes of the law, the first thing we're looking at with respect to District 7's piece of the puzzle is does it contribute to bringing the entire system back in that 10% balance? And as you can see, District 7 was as high as 269,000 as a result of the 2020 census. And under Plan 1, we get down to 246, closer to that average size. In Plan 2, we're a little bit larger at 260, but still closer to that average size. So from the 10% rule, what's happening in District 7 is consistent with what we need to do across the system to come back to more equal population. Now let's look at your consent decree. Your consent decree involves single member district number 4. It involves single member district number 2. It involves single member district number 3 and single member district number 6. So the consent decree does not specifically involve a single member district number 7. But from a voting rights standpoint, what you don't want to do is overpack a district with minority voters or underpack a district with minority voters. What's typically known as packing, putting well over the numbers that they need in order to elect a candidate of their choice. So well over 50% in one single member district, or splitting minority voters across single member districts so that they can't have influence. Looking at the numbers that you have in single member district number 7 with respect to your Asian population, your African American and Latino population, I do not see that either one has happened, cracking or packing. We've maintained, we have not retrogressed from the benchmark plan of 2013.
Okay, and we've complied with the principles that the board adopted.
Correct.
tonight. So any other way that we could or should look at this information presented tonight for SD7? Yes, SMD7.
For
not
SMD7,
SD7.
the additional way that we could look at SMD7 is to continue to receive feedback about neighborhoods and communities of interest. So that's where it's really, really important for the public that is watching us online. If there are any additional concerns or suggestions, particularly around the periphery of single member District 7 and the other single member districts that it borders, about neighborhoods, about polling locations, precincts, things that we want to keep together in one single member district. Excellent question, Chair Saldivar, about school districts, and has that changed with respect to the 2013 or current plan, because that goes along with communities of interest. It goes along with the political compactness that we were looking at. So that would be the only additional, I would say, criteria that we would look at and continue to look at, because that is what will be judging how we go from plan 1 to plan 2 to any additional plans, and then any additional plans after that, and then adopting a final plan is which one, because we know that we can comply with our consent decree with respect to single member District 7. We know we can comply with the 10% rule. We know we can comply with our criteria, but what is of those criteria, what gets us the best or the maximization of keeping communities of interest together, neighborhoods together, and political compactness?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Lisa,
And-
can I add something?
Yes, sir. Rocky, go fire
Again,
away.
I just want to make sure this is something that, just with all the people listening, that sometimes people get confused. We're changing single member district boundaries and not attendance boundaries, or actually ISD boundaries. So I don't want, sometimes people jump on, they're worried that they're going to get moved from one zone to another. This has nothing to do with where your student goes to school. This is
Thank you for
these are voting
clarifying that.
precincts. I'd just like to clarify that.
We appreciate the input. We
Yeah.
really do.
And really to clarify, because we're moving population from single member district to another single member district, what it impacts. And that's why it's important to the trustees, and that's why it's important to you at home, is who represents you. Because the population is getting moved into a single member district from a single member district. So of course that changes your representative. So that's the change that you're looking at.
Good. Thank you, Ms. McBride. Before that's agenda item number 4 is now complete in my eyes. Before we go to number 5, I would like to let the public know that, in line with what Ms. McBride said about public input, the redistricting website is www.lonestar.edu/redistricting. And all of our agendas, our videos, our initial maps, our schedule of meetings, and the initial change analysis are all currently posted. Thank you. Ms. McBride, feel free to go to item number 5 on the agenda, please.
Thank you so much, Trustee Sullivan. I'm going to call on my colleague, Ms. Stein, to complete the presentation tonight with timeline and immediate next steps.
Thank you, Lisa. So as we mentioned back in December, when the board adopted these redistricting criteria that we've gone over in good detail, they also adopted this timeline that we are following very diligently. And as you can see, we mentioned there's a redistricting committee that is made up of 3 board members chaired by Trustee Sullivan. And that committee will meet in March. And then that is when we will meet again with the demographer to take all of the information that we've gathered from these single member district forums, or the ones that we've conducted so far, rather, because they continue, and consider additional maps or amending the maps. So that's just one step along the way. And then the board will meet in its entirety in April at a special board meeting on redistricting. And again, the board will receive and be able to comment on additional amended maps that have changed in response to some comments that we've received from the public. And then we continue on meeting monthly with the board meetings are monthly and the redistricting committees are in between those meetings. In April, the redistricting committee will meet again with the demogrator to further develop maps, because as you'll see in the next couple of slides, we'll be holding single member district meetings almost weekly to gather enough information from the community. And then finally, in May, the board will narrow down to 1 to 2 maps based on all of this input they've received from the public and their own input as well. And then we'll hold in June a special board meeting where we'll be able to hear from the public more formally on the maps at the special board meeting. And in June, the redistricting committee will meet again to adjust the proposed maps and prepare for a final presentation and a recommendation to the entire board on which map we ultimately will go with, the board will go with. And then on June 29th is the final special board meeting on redistricting, where the board will adopt the final redistricting map after hearing from the community and hearing from each other on all issues. And this is just another way, a graphic to look at exactly where we've come from, where we are. We have just started this process of gathering community input from each individual district. And this is our first meeting for single member District 7 here on the 16th. And it takes us all the way to the end till June 29th, 2022, when the board will adopt the final map. And after this meeting and after each meeting with the redistricting committee, will update the website with the initial maps that have been proposed. We're now currently holding the individual single member district community meetings, and we'll hold a district-wide Zoom meeting after we complete our first round of single member district meetings. And this has the complete calendar of our first round of single member district meetings. And of course, we'll be holding the first round and then considering the information we've received to amend the maps, and then we'll hold a second round. So there'll be 2 opportunities for each single member district to hold a community forum and gather input from the public and present amended maps. And again, here's the website where you can learn anything you need to know about redistricting at Lone Star, the materials that we've presented to the board, that the demographer has presented to the board, will be on the website, as Trustee Sullivan has really already explained. And that, I think, is all we have for tonight.
Rocky, anything you'd like to say before we adjourn? I'm sorry. Thank you. Rocky, anything you'd like to add to the meeting before we adjourn?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Good
you
seeing
for
everybody.
participating. Your input's valuable and we appreciate it. Chair Saldivar, any final comments? Okay, thank you very much. Outside counsel, may I adjourn the meeting? Well, before I do, I should ask you, John, if anyone from the public has signed in to speak, or request to speak.
We currently do not have anyone who wishes to speak.
Okay, OTS advises no one is in the queue to speak now. Ms. McBride, may I proceed to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. This meeting's adjourned. Well done, everyone. Thank you all.